Welcome to the 20th Annual International Survivors of Suicide Loss Day. On behalf of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and Saddleback Church, we're glad that you're joining us today and online. My name is David Mondani. I'm the pastor of mental health at Saddleback Church. Survivor Day is a day when suicide loss survivors can gather together to find comfort and gain understanding as they share their stories of healing and hope. International Survivors of Suicide Loss Day was created by an act of Congress in 1999, and since then has been sponsored and supported by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. It takes place every year on the Saturday before American Thanksgiving. This year, there are over 360 locally organized events held throughout the U.S., Canada, and around the world. Saddleback Church has partnered with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention for the past 5 years, and our mutual vision is simple. It's to create a safe space where people can gather together to heal free of shame and stigma. I would like to thank everyone who contributed their time and effort to organizing this event, our volunteers, our exhibitors, staff, vendors, and presenters who are committed to share our vision today. As our guests, feel free to reach out to any staff or volunteer for the location of the restrooms. And if you have not yet visited our exhibitors, I would encourage you to take some time to stop by the gym just outside the doors to the left. There's a lot of great information available. If you need some one-on-one support, we do have trained staff. Please feel free to reach out to anyone on our pastoral care team. If you are on our pastoral care team, can you please raise your hand in here so you can take a look? We have about 10 or 11 people who will be serving today in that role. They are professionals, and they'll be wearing green badges and will be available throughout the day. They'll respect your privacy, but they will be available throughout the day. We have a great program today. We'll be hearing from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and from a survivor and their story. Then we'll watch The Journey. It's a documentary on the stories of hope and healing. And then we'll hear from Kay Warren, who is our co-founder of Saddleback Church. Like you, I'm a survivor of suicide loss. My cousin died by suicide last month, and I lost another cousin 4 years ago. My family has learned that we don't have to do it alone, and that everyone copes with grief in his or her own way. I've learned that even though it might seem impossible to you right now, we all have the capacity to heal. Healing is not about moving on or getting over it. It's about learning to make peace with our pain and finding the God-given purpose in our lives again. So I honor and commend you for being here today and watching online. I know that just getting yourself here this morning was very difficult for many of you, especially those who have experienced the loss of a loved one very recently. And so I admire you, I honor you, and I thank you for your courage to be here and online today. It is our hope that you will feel supported, cared for, and that all of you will leave here today with something that will help you in your own healing from the tragic loss of your loved one in your own personal way. It is my belief that your presence alone here today is in and of itself healing. So please settle comfortably into your seats. Take a deep breath with me and exhale slowly, letting your jaws relax. Let your shoulders relax. Now take another slow, deep breath. And let your heart be open to His word appropriate to you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor David. Well, on behalf of Saddleback Church and American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, I'd like to thank you all for coming out, and I want to express my heartfelt thanks to Saddleback Church for hosting this event. You put your heart and soul into this, and we greatly appreciate everything that you're doing. My name is Jim Taylor. I'm the chairman for the Orange County chapter of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Today is International Survivors of Suicide Loss Day, one of 360 events going on pretty much simultaneously worldwide. In 1999, Congress enacted this day in order to honor and to cause us to think back and try and find a solution to this problem. Now, with AFSP, I could stand up here and I could spout statistics. I could bore you with numbers, and those numbers are good when you're talking to legislators, trying to get them to develop a pro-mental health, a pro-suicide prevention agenda, and they're useful for fundraising. But the only statistic that really matters to me is that suicide is the #1 preventable cause of death. The #1 preventable cause. And that's what we're all about. What does AFSP do? Well, we're about education, advocacy, and outreach. The #1 obstacle to suicide prevention was the word suicide. For generations, that word has had a social stigma. We didn't talk about it. It was the S word. It was in the closet. Everybody was embarrassed. One of the first things that we have to do to combat suicide is to take that word out of the darkness, take its power away, shine a light on the word suicide, and we can start having an open and honest dialogue about what's really going on. If you talk to somebody who's contemplating suicide and you say, hey, if I could wave a magic wand right now and take away your pain, do you still want to take your own life? And the answer is no. So suicide is less about killing yourself. It's more about eliminating the pain. So let's find a way to start eliminating the pain. In order to do that, we need to have an open, honest dialogue. We need people to come out and talk about it. People are afraid to say, I'm having suicidal thoughts, because they're going to lose their job. They're going to be stigmatized by society. They're going to be classified and labeled as having a mental illness. So they don't talk about it. We need to talk about it. We need to take away the power that that word has and holds over us. So we provide education. Besides talking about suicide openly, bringing it out in the open, we provide seminars. We go into small groups and large groups and we talk about suicide prevention, how to recognize the signs, how to talk to somebody about it, how to say the right words, what to deal, or how to deal with an individual who is attempted, what not to say. Earlier this year, we reached an agreement with the Department of Defense and the Department of Veteran Affairs. We've always had access to military, but pretty much they had to come to our events. Well, as of this year, they gave us access to all military, from recruits to special forces, and now we have an army of 10,000 people that are available to go in and talk to our veterans and our active military personnel about suicide prevention, to talk to them, to their friends, and recognize when their associate, their friend, is not just sad. Maybe they're more than sad. And how to get them to talk about it, how to get them to go out and seek the help. We do advocacy. We send people en masse to Sacramento, to the legislatures, all on the same day, and we descend upon the Capitol building. We talk to legislatures about bills regarding mental health, bullying, and suicide prevention. Once a year, we send 500 plus people to Washington to descend upon Congress and the Senate, the House of Representatives and the Senate, and we do the same thing. Now we're at the national level, at the state level, and at the local level. And we do outreach. We put our material out there. We put our banners out there. We let everybody know that, hey, we're here if you want to talk to us, whether you want to talk about your problems where you are considering taking your own life, or whether you've lost somebody. We have materials, we have resources. We don't provide counseling, but we have resources. We can direct people. Our function is to get people talking about suicide prevention. We do all the mental health forums. People expect to see us there. They don't expect to see us at a farmer's market, but we're there. They don't expect to see us in parades. This year alone, AFSP Orange County marched in the Swallows Day Parade in San Juan Capistrano, the Lake Forest 4th of July Parade, and December 8th, we got a float in the Laguna Niguel Holiday Parade. When we did these parades, the announcers went off script. We have our standard marketing spiel that they're supposed to say, and several of the announcers said, all right, listen up, people, this is important. And some of our areas in the parade where our group was walking by, people started applauding. We recognize there's a problem. Americans recognize there's a problem, and they know that there's a solution, and we can find it. I would invite everybody to join AFSP. There's no cost. Come to one of our meetings. Go to our website. Find us on Facebook. We've got a lot to do. We're making progress, but we've got a lot to do. Now, I know everybody here is hurting, and I understand that. One thing I will leave you with this, is that I don't want you carrying any guilt. We all have 20/20 hindsight. We can all look back on everything. I mean, I've been divorced. You think I would have seen the red flags? No. But after I was divorced, I went back, well, you know, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. I put it all together, but at the time, I'm in the moment, I don't see it. Should I feel guilty for that? I don't want you feeling guilty. Feel sad. Feel angry. Don't feel guilty. That's not on you. And so if you take away anything from today, it's not your fault. We are learning. We're trying to recognize the signs and the symptoms in the moment. This is a process for all of us. I want to thank you. Many of you have taken the very first step today in the healing process. And I just wanted to let you know that if you look around, you're not alone. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Now I'd like to bring up a young lady right now to give us a testimonial. She has a survivor story for you. Erica Kang.
Good morning. My name is Erica, and this is really special for me to have the chance to share with you my story on Survivor Day. Thank you to Pastor David Mandani for extending the invitation, and to AFSP for the work you do to support this cause that's really near and close to my heart. And I'm grateful to Kay, Warren, so grateful for the ways you've taken your own pain and loss that's allowed you to forge a path for this important mental health ministry here at Saddleback. I'm not much of a public speaker, but being here in your company is strangely comfortable because I know we're all here with the same shared and unwanted experience as being survivors of suicide. I'm sure there are many of you here who could be up here sharing your own stories, but for whatever reason, God has provided me this opportunity to share with you all today, which has been over 30 years in the making. You see, introducing myself to strangers was once, and sometimes still is, an absolutely paralyzing and terrifying ordeal. I learned really young and got really good at being alone and avoiding people. But it consequently created a desperate and painful hunger to truly be known. I avoided new social situations because I dreaded one question that any common interpersonal exchange would inevitably pose. So, do you have any brothers or sisters? I mean, it's a question you and I would ask when we're getting to know someone at for the first time. Having small talk. It's simple and innocuous that can even afford us all a glimpse into someone's personality if you believe in the strength and the power of birth order. But it's a question I still cannot answer with the kind of ease that many can. If you asked me this question when I was 6 years old, I would have proudly answered that I had 2 big sisters. They loved and doted on me as the baby of the family. I remember stories of them fighting over who would feed me the bottle. And being born of 2 hardworking, non-English speaking immigrants, they often functioned as surrogate parents to me. But on the eve of my 7th birthday, my oldest sister, Janice, ended her life when she was just 23. I didn't learn it was a suicide until I was faced with the reality of the same fate My second sister, Sunny, also took just 4.5 years later in 1990. I was 11 years old and just starting my adolescent preteen years, which we all know alone can be traumatic in and of themselves, and something I'm experiencing all too well right now as a mom of 3 girls, almost 10, 12, and 14. I knew my sister Sunny struggled with Janice's death because we shared a bedroom until the very day she would never return home. I suddenly assumed the unwelcome title as the only child of the family. I was always now, it was reintroduced when my parents introduced me to new people. My sisters didn't exist. I felt completely abandoned, not important enough to even be worth living for. During Sunny's burial, I vividly remember feeling the terrifying urge to hurl myself atop the casket as it was being lowered to the ground. I wanted her back, and none of what was happening seemed real. And for many years after that day, there was a dark shroud that covered my emotions and perceptions of God, His love, and any sense of purpose in my life. Feelings of death, hopelessness, and abandonment were the prevailing emotions and thoughts that pervaded my most formative years, all things my parents and I were not prepared to navigate my teenage years with. So we desperately clung to our local church community. We didn't have things like AFSP. Even at that time, seeking professional health was very much taboo, and especially in our culture. But our church community was a lifeline that kept us from being swallowed alive, at times barely, by our own pain and loss. The deep pain and abandonment I felt most of my childhood and teenage years made me an emotional leper to the truth of God's love and grace that I had heard about at church each week. Too many times I came so close to giving up on any sense of faith and meaning in my own life. But it was also in those times I wrestled hard with God. And it did not happen miraculously overnight. But through my faith journey, church family, and a lot of great counseling, God graciously brought about healing and redemption beyond what I could have ever imagined as a young 11-year-old girl. As I saw my church community worship week after week, this foreign idea of a loving and gracious God revealed through the life and death and resurrection of Jesus created a huge chasm I needed to reconcile. The weekly sermons and times of worship went head to head with my own experiences, and therefore challenged me to seek God and His truth much more desperately than your average teenager. In Psalm 34:18, it says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." As abandoned and hopeless as I felt from a young girl, His healing love slowly but surely went even deeper, revealing a supernatural and miraculous love. Today, I'm a wife to a loving and supporting husband whom God has greatly used to continue to bring about healing in my life. For most of my years and early 20s, I was convinced I was never meant to live past 22 or 23 because those were the models I had growing up and the only path that made sense to me. But by no power or planning of our own, our firstborn daughter, Allie, was born on my 26th birthday, which is coming up next Friday. I'm going to be 40. She'll be 14. Every year, our birthday is God's declaration of life and hope. He graciously gifted me with a new narrative on that day, on the day she was born, and incarnated a new reality. My life would no longer be marked by death and hopelessness, but new life and a living hope. So I stand here today with you, not just a survivor of suicide, but as someone who's thriving in spite of suicide. And I owe that all to our Creator God. And I just want to encourage you all today don't stop seeking him. Don't stop wrestling. He's not too big for your questions and pain. Because he's shown himself greater than it all through the work on the cross. And I pray that truth will continue to bring you healing and hope today and every day. Thanks.
Thank you, Erica. And congratulations on turning 40. I don't even remember 40. All right, now we have a film for you. This film was produced by AFSP in 2014. It's called The Journey. It tells the stories of a diverse group of suicide loss survivors. It's a compelling film that shows how each survivor is weathering the loss of a loved one and how they're finding their way back to a life rich in meaning and even in joy. So may I present The Journey.
One of the main ways that I've coped with it was doing the things that he loved to do. He loved to be out in the water, in the sun.
Well, this place is pretty special. You only ever see like 5 boats on the water, beautiful sun.
There's no other water like this place. We grew up coming here, spent countless hours on the water, pretty much on this boat only. Just great memories here. Our father passed to suicide by shooting himself. I was 12 years old and Dylan was 10.
Grief is something that happens very naturally and spontaneously for all of us when there's a loss of any kind. And healing happens when that grief is processed in a way that the person is able to work through it. And so there is an element of control that we all can have. Healing is a process and a journey. Suicide cuts across all people groups, age ranges, cultures, races, socioeconomic status, and educational levels.
I lost my son, David. He jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge, and he was 16 years old.
I lost my best friend 5 years ago, 2009. He stepped in front of the kill train.
When I was 20, my father hung himself, and then in 1984, my brother hung himself.
I lost my son to suicide by self-inflicted gunshot wound.
Grieving and healing after a suicide death is different from other types of death, in part because of the cultural stigmas that surround suicide.
You weren't supposed to talk about it. You just weren't supposed to. I mean, my mother and I didn't even want to talk about it. So somewhere along the line, I got to the point where I had to tell people because it defined me. I just needed to not have this terrible big secret.
In the Asian American community, suicide is viewed as something that is taboo. It's dishonorable. It's about the whole family, not just the person who died.
The day that my brother passed away, my dad he didn't talk about my brother, he just talked about work. For a whole month, we did everything normal. We went to work, we came home, went to work, and we didn't say anything. That month seemed like it was a year.
I think the stigma has to be, hands down, the most frustrating thing about this entire process. Everyone doesn't want to talk about it, and especially in a community where in high school we lost 2 other classmates in addition to my boyfriend, and then I graduate and like 6 months later one of my classmates from high school passes away from suicide again. It's a community that's really seen it and knows it in every way possible, and they still can't talk about it.
Ricky was a Marine. He loved being a Marine. He had just returned from Afghanistan. In the military culture, the stigma is multiplied by 100. You show no sign of weakness.
You have to be ready to fight the wolf at the door. The suicide stigma is implying that that person is weak. I'll tell anybody, anywhere, any place, anytime how my son died.
People will often avoid families and individuals who've lost a loved one to suicide. They may be fearful, they may not understand what has just happened, and they may not know what to say.
The close friends that I used to have, they kind of avoided me, and I didn't know why. And a lot of people just kind of saw me as the girl who lost her best friend to suicide, and that was the only thing they knew about me.
I could walk down the grocery store and see people visibly avoid me. And it was really hard. I keep trying to figure out why he did it. Why we didn't see anything, why we didn't know anything.
We try to make sense of the world around us in every instance, let alone with a situation that is so dire and has caused such a gaping hole of tragedy and loss in one's life. The natural question of why is obviously at the forefront of trying to figure out what led to that person's death.
This was his first black belt. He had just gotten his second-degree black belt. He had a girlfriend that he was just head over heels in love with. The morning that he died, he logged on, downloaded his grades, and found out that he made the dean's list. He knew how to put a smile on everyone's face and could make anyone laugh when they were about to cry. May you always rest in paradise, David. That was him.
Some people have this incredible ability to cloak what's happening on the inside. The assumption may be that they're in their right mind, they're in a rational state of mind. The reality for people who are suicidal is that they're in such a desperate place of hopelessness, they also feel that they're a burden to others. So it's not intuitive to be able to understand that mental state.
I don't know that I will ever know why, but I feel like I did get some answers when I found his journal. I had no idea how much pain he was in.
It's not that she didn't want to be with me, she just didn't want to be.
Even in situations where they know that their loved one is suffering and even thinking of suicide, there is still an element of such shock.
My dad was an alcoholic for 41 years, and he even tried to overdose on blood pressure pills several months before he died by suicide. Even then, I didn't know he could actually do it. I never believed it could happen.
I was 27 when we got married. Nancy was diagnosed with severe depression approximately 2 years before her death. But we got her treatment, got her hospitalized, seeing a psychiatrist on medication, and she seemed to be doing well for most of the time, but a few months before her death, she just started feeling not normal. But I had no clue she would take her life. If I didn't find her body, I wouldn't have believed that she did it, but she did.
Research shows quite clearly that in 90% of the cases of suicide that have been studied, a mental illness was at play and playing a key role.
My mom suffered from depression for a long time, and she didn't really talk too much about it to most people. A lot of people came up to me at her funeral saying that they had no idea, but I knew.
Dustin had been suffering with depression for a couple of years, and when he was diagnosed, the doctor gave him medicine. I just thought that, the pill made everything better, and it didn't.
Suicide comes from a disease. Cancer is a disease. People sometimes pass away from cancer. Sometimes people pass away from a mental disease through suicide.
We did know something was amiss. My father attempted suicide once before.
In probably the last 2 years of his life, he was battling such severe depression that he almost doesn't seem like he was the same person. It wasn't him at the end. He even carried himself smaller. And so for me, that's not my dad. My dad's the loving, caring, smiling, laughing, joking person that I had my whole childhood up until he became sick.
Every person grieves in their own way. So that can create a lot of tension within one family or within a married couple. I think it's something to be aware of, to have great compassion and acknowledgement and appreciation for the way the other person is different. That's okay. It's not bad. It's just different.
My wife and I grieve differently. I go to the gym, I sweat, I work on the house, I do stuff like that, and that helped me process my grief. She journals. I can't do it. I can tear stuff up, beat it up. I can't journal.
The emotions that come with grieving a suicide loss can be extremely intense, and some of them rather surprising. Anger can be there, guilt, shame, or even a sense of relief.
I did feel guilty, but on the other hand, I also felt a sense of relief. And I think some people struggle with that feeling. I no longer had to worry where he was going to live, how he was going to pay his bills. No longer had to worry that he was lonely. If he was passed out, if he was struggling, I no longer had to worry.
I had a profound sense of relief when my brother died. I thought for sure he was going to kill my mother at some point. I just felt like he was saving a lot of us the continual, unbelievable angst of trying to monitor or live with or live around or even know about his crazy existence. So I was very relieved. But I wasn't supposed to tell anybody that.
I felt like I was abandoned, that maybe it was because I wasn't good enough.
I have a lot of guilt. I was very close to my mom. I know that it's not my fault, but it's just very hard to shake that feeling.
And there was always like a voice in the back of my head, like, you know, maybe if I just gave him a hug, like, told him that I loved him. But over time, I've come to realize that it's a natural instinct to try and blame something, to look for fault, to point the finger.
My dad would call me every day and say, "It's your fault. You did it." And I would just hang up on him. And I have 2 other siblings, and I realized that he called everyone every day and said, "You guys, it's your fault. You guys did it." The day of the wake, my aunt asked me if there's anything she can do. I said, "Well, you could tell my dad to stop blaming me." After that day, he stopped blaming me. Well, once in a while he does. I'd rather have that than every day.
I had so many emotions, I didn't know how to deal with it, so one way it came out was anger. I was actually a textbook bully.
I was kind of the complete opposite when we were young. I don't think I've ever felt an ounce of anger in my heart towards him. I understand that he hurt, and he hurt so bad, and I could never be mad at someone for being in pain.
I was never angry with the military. I was never angry with my son. I was angry with people that had grandkids. I was angry with people that had kids. And so eventually I had to come to grips with my anger. The aha moment was I was heading to work. One of his favorite songs came on the radio, and when I realized I was sitting on side the road in a ditch in my truck, crying like a baby. So the man car was torn up, thrown out the window, and I had to deal with my grief. So when I allowed myself to grieve, I was allowed to give up the anger so I could get better.
The process of grief is just so variable for different people. And so, you know, there are formal theories of the steps that one would go through, from denial and shock to anger to sadness to acceptance. But I think the reality for anyone going through that and walking that path is that it is not linear. It's anything but that. And so just having compassion for oneself is a great thing to try to give oneself in the process of grief.
In the very beginning, I think what helped me was someone told me to just focus on the basics. Just breathe in, breathe out, drink water, eat some food, make sure that there are people who take care of you.
At the beginning, my feelings mainly were just denial and disbelief. I remember for the first few months, when I would go to sleep, one of the things I would think is I don't even care if I wake up, first of all. And another thing was that when I wake up, it's just a bad nightmare. Nancy's gonna be right here with me. I just felt so alone without her. I didn't know what to do. For the first 6 months, I was just in a very black place, very dark place. I did find a support group that helped a lot. All the participants were like myself, who lost somebody to suicide. We would meet once a week and talk about things, and that was probably the biggest thing that helped.
People will talk about being caught by surprise, that one day suddenly there's just a different feeling about them. They may notice it because they laugh for the first time since their loved one passed. It may be just a feeling they have of connection to life and to others that feels new. And those are really excellent signs that healing is occurring.
The light came back. For me, it's going to dance class. I'm feeling happy again. I can enjoy the music and the movement, and there were times where I could laugh and times where I felt joy. There were really little pockets, just an hour or something. But because of that, that just gave me hope that I can still feel that. And now I just trust those phases get longer, and I have a week where I'm fine. And when I'm really low and really sad, I trust that this good part will come back. And it always does.
Sometimes people will find that they get stuck in their healing process because they're using counterproductive approaches that really serve more as a distraction or a way to numb. Alcohol, drugs. Other people may tend to just busy their schedules so tremendously that they don't have a single moment to think or self-reflect, and that's part of processing, actually.
I lost my mother. I was 10 years old and she was 30. Our family, we just didn't talk about it. I mean, it was buried. I would not allow myself to think about her death. I always had the TV on, the radio on. There was some kind of noise. And so I ended up going to therapy. And the therapist said, okay, so you've got this anger, which had gone on for a few sessions. What are you going to do with that? And I realized she was right. I didn't want to be angry at my mom. I needed to get rid of that. And so I told my husband, I said I wanted to go to Mom's grave. I wrote a final letter to my mom, and I forgave her. I wadded up the paper, put it in the bottom of the vase, and I was able to let go of that anger. That letter that I wrote to my mom came 44 years after her death. It's never too late for healing or forgiveness.
There are forms of getting stuck that can be more serious. Clinical depression, for example. This is a setup of a time of great loss and stress and change that can actually bring on an episode of depression as a layer on top of grief.
I was abused as a child. I remember being, in 7th grade, looking on my laptop on how to kill myself. So when Tyler passed away from suicide, it really brought up a lot of my own emotional pain. As a man, you were always taught, be a man, suck it up, and you're always supposed to be tough. And for me, I was hurting a lot inside, and I didn't know how to express it. And I know when I admitted I needed help is when I started to get better.
As you grieve, you may get to a point where you realize that certain behaviors aren't serving you well anymore. And then it's time to really do some hard thinking and maybe make some changes in the way that you're approaching your grief.
When I was cleaning out my son's house, I found his journal. I don't know why, but I just kept going back and reading it, and every time I would cry and cry. And I finally said, this is not good for me. The only way I'm going to heal is to quit reading this. So I finally shredded his journal, and no one ever read it except for me.
One of the things that's helped me probably most since David died was I've been able to connect with a group of mothers who have lost their children to suicide. I would go to the meetings and just listen and talk and ask. Now I'm hosting some of the meetings, and I'm working with mothers who have just recently lost their children to suicide. And I never thought that I would be able to help others. And it feels good.
For some, religion and spirituality provide a great source of comfort and a way to find meaning and purpose in the experience of loss.
One day I was out in my backyard and I noticed this great big copper dragonfly flying around. And I noticed that it was landing on pointy things. So I walked out into the middle of the yard and I put my finger out, and it landed on my finger. And I'm part North American Indian, and in the North American Indian culture, dragonflies are a symbol of healing from a traumatic grief or loss. They live most of their life as nymphs. And when they mature into these beautiful dragonflies, they live a life of grand adventure. And they say they have these great big eyes that allow them to see into the next world. David became my dragonfly. I had a dragonfly tattooed on my back. He sits on my shoulder and goes with me wherever I go.
I don't want Nancy's death to define her. She was kind, she was loving, she was funny. Her illness caused her mind to think that her only way out was to kill herself, but that was such a small part of her life. Even though it's been almost 8 years, I think of her all the time still. My years with her have made me who I am today, and until I die, she'll be part of me.
The healing journey can include self-discovery, growth, positive impact on others, and in all of these ways, your own healing can represent great honor for your loved one who has died.
He always had a cowboy hat. Always, 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 always.
Didn't matter whether it's in shorts, sandals, boots. I mean, he always had his hat on.
This hat that we have is actually the hat he wore when he married Mom.
My mom brought it along to my graduation, Dylan's high school graduation as well, to kind of include him in the day, even though he can't be physically there. It's our way of having him there.
David took piano lessons for years. And when he died, the first year I kept walking past that piano, and all I could remember was the beautiful music that came out of it and how much fun he had with it. So I started taking piano lessons. I've been taking them for a little over a year now. It's been a way to connect with him. It makes me happy. It brings back great memories.
It doesn't define your life, it just becomes part of the life story. And it's nice to be able to share that story and grow with your story and become stronger because of it. I was only 12 years old when he passed, and it amazes me every day how much he was able to teach me in just those 12 years. He taught me how to be strong and independent. He taught me that when life gets tough, you cowgirl up and get right back on. So I'm thankful. I'm thankful he was able to teach me so much in such a short amount of time.
When it's tough, you just take it day by day and try and enjoy the good moments when you realize it, and it almost makes them that much better.
For me, I feel very blessed. My life is going amazingly well. Just looking back on Nancy's death, it seems like it's another life. I fell in love again, which was a miracle in itself. And I got married, and I have a little 17-month-old baby at home. Can you believe that? I'm 53, and I'm changing diapers.
The more you go through it, the more you understand that you can get through it. I used to think of David all the time and just be sad. And as time's gone by, now I think about him and I have happier thoughts, I have good memories.
Continued healing to us all.
This is the 5th year that Saddleback Church has partnered with AFSP to host this International Survivor Suicide Loss Day, and we are honored, truly honored, that you would be here with us. We're honored to open this space to you as a safe place where you can, those of you who are survivors of suicide loss, those of you who might be suicide attempt survivors, and those of you maybe who live with some chronic thoughts of suicide. Many of you know that at each of these I have spoken from my perspective as a mom who lost my adult son Matthew to serious mental illness and suicide in 2013. And at first, I could barely breathe, as many of these other survivors have shared, as Erica shared, as you saw in the video, barely breathe. It didn't matter what I ate. It didn't matter if I drank anything. And a good day was to get out of bed and brush my teeth. I didn't care about what happened in the world. World events didn't matter. I didn't care the latest movies that were on. I didn't care if our bills got paid, because my life as I knew it ended on April 5th, 2013. And everything about the world and my life became compressed into 2 words: unbearable pain. And my family's grief journey has been arduous. I can't pretend otherwise. Grieving has been the hardest work I have ever done. I've never done anything harder in my life than to begin to try to heal from the loss of my son. But I can tell you that slowly, so very slowly, we are beginning to heal from the trauma of the 20 years of his serious mental illness and from the trauma of his death. And through these years, I have become a passionate advocate for suicide awareness and prevention, and have a passion for walking alongside others who are living with this loss, those who live with those chronic thoughts of suicidality, and with the families that are left to grieve. Really soon after Matthew died, just within a few months, I heard about AFSP's one of their walks. They have several local ones, but they had one that was called an Out of the Darkness Walk. And in an Out of the Darkness Walk, it was a fundraiser in which you sign up and you walk from sunset to sunrise. It can be a course of 16 to 18 miles, just depending on the course. But the significance, I was captivated by that significance. Because when I first heard of it, it was only a couple of months after Matthew died, and things were just so dark. And to think of doing a walk to honor him and his memory and all of those who have lost and all those that are struggling, to think of starting at sunset and walk when the night is the darkest, and to walk until the sun comes up, to walk from darkness into light, seemed like one of the most hopeful things that I could do, that would signify that I believed that somehow, some way, we too would come from darkness into the light again. But I couldn't do it. It was just too soon. I couldn't even think about it. And so each year after, I would think I'd hear about one of the walks, and I would think, no, I'm just not ready yet, until last year. And so last year in 2017, a few weeks before the walk, I decided I was going to do it, and I rallied 6 other friends who said they would walk with me in San Diego in AFSP's Out of the Darkness Walk. And I'd like to read to you from my journal. I got home after walking from darkness to light, and I wrote in my journal, I feel like that it will share with you the hope that I can feel from being in those darkest places to where I'm beginning to see some light again. The 7 of us started off with enthusiasm, energy, and determination. The night was warm, the sunset was beautiful, and we jumped into the middle of 1,000 other folks walking in memory of someone they dearly loved. I had on 2 pair of socks. I had wrapped several of my toes in Dr. Scholl's toe protectors. I had my fanny packs stocked with 2 water bottles that were so stupid that it looked like I was wearing 6 shooters on my hips. And I had my emergency kit of Band-Aids, chapstick, and Advil safely tucked away in my pocket. At mile 3, I had the distinct sensation in my legs and feet that this was the craziest idea I had ever had, and I wondered why in the world I thought I, a non-athlete, could walk 16 miles in one stretch. At mile 6, I seriously wanted to quit. I am not an athlete. I'm actually a bit of an exercise wimp and had never walked that many miles at one point in my life. It was just too much. My knees were starting to hurt. My feet, encased in toe protectors, gauze, and socks, were uncomfortable, and I could not see myself walking for many more hours. But then I looked around at the friends walking by my side. One who needed a hip replacement, who said every step I take hurts. But he signed on at the last minute, and he was able to walk 12 of the 16 miles. Another friend with me was walking for herself and for her friends who have died. About halfway through, she developed a painful knee problem, but she was determined to finish. Another friend walking with me has a bad neck in constant pain, and yet she was walking. Another friend started having knee problems and a big blister on her toe, but she walked. One overachieving marathon running friend with us who never even breathed heavily and continued to run circles around the rest of us, keeping us laughing and mocking us to keep us motivated to keep going. I tell you, by myself, I would have dropped out. But with the encouragement of my team of walkers and people on the street who said to us, "Thank you for walking." And as I saw mentally ill men, clearly mentally homeless men in gutters and under street bridges who said through their tears as we passed them, "My brother died last year, and I attempted a few months ago. Thank you for walking for me and for my brother." When I saw the bouncers and the restaurant patrons and people going about their normal Saturday night business who said as they saw us walk, "Thank you." And the two men who walked backwards, who started at the finish line and walked against traffic to express gratitude to all the rest of us for walking for their loved ones. With that kind of encouragement, I decided I had to keep walking. And then, after we had been walking for a few hours, we received a text that said a Saddleback student had attempted suicide and was in the hospital. Really? While we were walking to prevent suicide, another precious student in my own church attempted? Could the need be any more real? Could it be any more apparent and urgent and desperate? And this is an emergency. And then my young friend who was walking wearing green beads, some of you have on green beads, who was wearing green beads to signify, green beans too, I don't know, green beads to signify that she too struggles with the relentless voices in her head telling her to end her life. So young and yet already familiar with depression and anxiety and an eating disorder. She was walking with tears and sobs for the younger girl she had just learned who had attempted, and for herself and for other friends she had lost in the last year. Began walking with a pronounced limp in her knee, with a steady pounding of pain, but not giving up. Not on herself, not on the girl in the hospital, not letting suicide win. And then we walked through sketchy parts of town, you guys, places where street lights were low, and the course would take a turn, and we weren't exactly sure where to go. And it was this small light that every participant had been given. In the darkness of the middle of the night, street lights low, really bad parts of town, where I couldn't see if the sign marker had moved us and if we were going to miss the road. What I could do was look ahead at these blue lights, hundreds of blue lights ahead of me. Showed me the way to go. Said, "This is the way, follow me." And I knew I could keep walking because there were people ahead of me pointing the way. They had made it through the sketchy parts of town. They had made it over the rough, uneven pavement and the dark lighting. And if they were making it, then I could too. They gave me hope, and their light gave me the certainty and determination to keep going until we reached the 16-mile marker, almost to the finish line. I don't know if that picture is up. There's a picture of us at the finish line. I'm leaning forward, barely standing. But there we were at mile 16. Then we walked another half a mile to the giant finish line sign that was lined with luminarias, covered with the pictures of the 950 people represented in that walk who had died. Too many people. There were too many luminarias. Too many people have died from this tragic, horrific response to pain. And they were laid out, forming words like hope and stay. And I began to search for Matthew's luminaria in that group of 950. Seeing his luminaria lit, his barely smiling face with the eyes that betray his suffering, my body temperature plummeted. Tears came from the depths of my soul. My body shook with shock, dehydration, fatigue, and sorrow, and I couldn't stop shaking. I laid down on the ground on a rescue Mylar blanket, and I covered my head, blocking out sound and light and cold, and I curled into a ball, missing my son, hating that he died, hating that he had left us, hating that so many others left their loved ones to struggle to survive, struggle to go on living, to struggle to deal with traumatic memories, struggle to take care of children and grandchildren without these precious ones, leaving us as survivors to rebuild hope, to find meaning in the loss, to somehow figure out a way to lessen the pain our loved ones were enduring so that others would not see killing themselves as their only option. This is how I conclude my journal. So, yes, Matthew, I walked for you, my love, and I will do it again with better preparation, with more training, with better shoes, with more knowledge, maybe with more friends, but certainly never with more love than I feel right now. This walk has made me miss you more. I so wanted us to be advocates together, to raise our voices together for change in the mental health care system, for more compassionate doctors, for more tender nurses and social workers and orderlies, for more dignity, for greater understanding of your suffering, for better treatments and therapies, for better and more effective medication, for more research on what might actually work, for stronger hope. This is what I wanted. It's not what I got. I have to do it without you. So I'll walk, I'll talk, I'll pray, I'll plead, I'll beg, I'll scream, I'll whisper, I'll ask, I'll preach, I'll listen, I'll cry, I'll yell. I will do it all for you, my son. For all the other Matthews trapped inside a body with a mind that doesn't work right. For the hope that one day it will pay off in fewer people dying by their own hand. I will be a light, pointing the way to Jesus, the light of the world, so that maybe others will find the light of hope. I love you, and I will see you again, my beautiful son. Some of you today are here newly, freshly bereaved, and you are in the fog and in the quicksand of this intense loss, and you probably can't even imagine ever being able to do anything at all positive with this terrible loss that you have suffered. Some of you here are a few steps beyond the initial loss, and you're slowly figuring out how to live again, how to love again, how to hope again. Some of you, like me, are ready to find ways to use this grief and this loss and this struggle to help someone else on their journey. Some of you may be ready to be a light for others in their darkness. Don't rush. It will come. I just want you to know that there are many resources for you at each step of the way, from the very beginnings when you feel like you can't breathe. You're not even sure you want to keep breathing. For those for whom the fog is beginning to lift just a little. For those of you who are learning that you don't move on, you move through. In the exhibition area, exhibitors area, there are resources, there are support groups. For those of you, particularly in those fresh places today, following the Dove release, we're going to have just a time for you, those of you who freshly bereaved and just need to know that you are not alone, that there is hope. We're going to gather together. It's an optional time. And maybe you wouldn't say it's not necessarily you're newly bereaved, but you just need a little extra support today. We'll be gathering after the Dove release just to give you the opportunity to talk to some other folks, ask some questions, get connected maybe to a support group, or just be with others who share your experience as a newly bereaved survivor of suicide loss. Maybe somebody will come up to you and tell you, I know exactly how you feel. And I just want to say, no, they don't. That's one of the things I've learned. And so I'm not going to tell you that I know exactly how you feel. Even those of you who've lost children, even those of you wearing white beads here today, I cannot tell you that I know exactly how you feel, because you are the only ones who loved your loved one the way that you did. Each grief journey is unique. Each grief journey has its own elements. But really what I can tell you is, I'm so sorry for any loss that you have experienced, for the loss of husbands and wives, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins, dear friends. We are here today to say to each other, I don't know exactly how you feel, but I share pain and I share your loss. And I hope someday to share hope. I can tell you, I share that hope. So as we close this section, and we'll go out to the grassy area outside of the main part of the worship area for those of you that are here, where you came in, there'll be a dove release, and after that, some of you may want to stay for the newly bereaved, a recently bereaved time of, we'll meet for 30 or 40 minutes. You can stay or not stay. But I'd like to just pray for us as we close this part. God, we desperately miss our loved ones. These sons and daughters, mothers and fathers, husbands, wives, nieces, nephews, sisters, brothers, and our dear friends. You have said, God, that you are the God of all comfort. And many of us in this room today are in deep need of solace and comfort, to know that we are not alone in our sorrow and pain. Many of my friends here have unanswered questions and the nagging sense that they should have been able to prevent their loved one from dying. Please help us today to release those feelings of guilt and remorse, to know deep in our hearts that we loved our loved ones as best we knew how. And may we believe that somehow, some way, there will eventually be beauty from these terrible ashes of loss. May being together today in this space increase our sense of belonging and community, of being listened to, of being cared for. I pray that as the days and the months and the years go by, that hope, that tiny little seedling of hope, of green life, will begin again in the hearts of all who suffer. I pray this in the name of my best friend, my Savior, Jesus. Amen. Take your time to slowly get up and move to the area where the dove release will be. Please know again, those of you who are here as our prayer counselors, would you mind just raising your hands again so that folks might, maybe you could stand up. It'd be easier for others to identify you. Some of you may have already gone on out. Just know you can talk to any of us. Thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you for joining us online.